And I think coaches really need to understand how impactful that they are, because you can ruin a player or you can make them absolutely love the game. Coach Steve, what do we have this week?
Yeah, guys, welcome back. The summer's winding down and fall ball is right around the corner for us. We're getting ready not just with our own teams, but with all of our coaches as well. Today, we're actually running an in-house coaches clinic with our entire staff to discuss practice planning, standards for the organization, do's and don'ts, game day responsibilities, communication with parents, and we're also going to answer any questions that they might have for us. When I think about fall ball, I think one of the biggest struggles is how quickly it gets on you. Kids and families, they're getting back to school this week. A lot of them are just coming back from vacation, and baseball's not really a priority for a lot of the kids at the end of August. You're only going to get a handful of practices before that first tournament. So I think practice planning and being prepared for those first couple sessions is crucial. So I guess my first question to you, Coach Duke, with minimal practices before the start of the fall season, that first weekend's right around the corner. What are some things that you like to focus on?
Well, I think some of the things, we're going to be working with I'm going to be working with the 11s and the 13s. So for the 11s, it's their first time ever, 50-70. So for them, it's number one, we have to make sure that we're going over the signs. Number two, we have to make sure that we are teaching our pitchers how to hold runners on, how to pick off, how to make sure that our middles can keep their runners close. So doing that, and then it's, teaching them how to steal and how to take leads. Like, it's their first in all those things. So we have to make sure that we really take notes for ourselves on what we need to teach. So we don't just let the practices run us. We have to make sure that we run the practices. So really being prepared for what do we need to teach, and then setting up the drills and stuff for that. And when you were asking the question, I was also thinking to myself, well, I think before we even do that, it's, okay, what do we want out of the season? Who are going to be our assistant coaches? What equipment do we have? Kind of like leading up to that first practice is making sure that our backpack is filled with all the things that we need, right? Our med kits and our pitch counters and our, clipboards and our baller boards, and just kind of being totally prepared, for that first practice. So we have everything that we need to be able to do all of our coaching. So I think that at 11U, it's that. When you're talking about the 13s, well, they're on the big field for the first time. So now it's almost like you're reteaching everything, but just in a bigger capacity. So I think that depending on the age, that will dictate what we're doing. So I guess my question back to you is, our guys are 15 now. So what does that look like for you and those guys?
Yeah, it's not as hard as the two age groups you just said. I think that jump to 50-70 for the first time. There's so much to teach in such a short amount of time. 13U, that drastic or that dreaded jump to the big field for the first time. It's like you're teaching baseball all over again. Even just positioning and where to play and who's the cutoff man. A lot of times on the Little League field, the pitcher's the cutoff for everything. So now it's really teaching them how to play the game the right way. And I think it's going to go with them forever. When I think about the 15s, one of the biggest challenges, we talked about how quick it gets on us, but also how quick the fall season goes. I mean, it gets freezing out by the end of October. We're looking at 6 weeks max, and then it's over. These kids are coming back, like we said, from vacation. Who knows who's even picked up a baseball in the last couple weeks or even a month. The teams are significantly different than they were in the summer because we have so many football players. And, we encourage that, and we tell our guys, your own son's doing it. Go play football, be a multi-sport athlete. So the team's going to look different. And I think in the first couple weeks, you've really got to get a feel for who you've got on the roster. Who are my pitchers? Who are my catchers? Who can play the infield? Who can play the outfield? Who are my power guys? What's the lineup look like? What's the roster look like? So you really have to do a good job the first couple practices evaluating, but also coaching. And to your point, there's got to be a balance between the development and then also kind of throwing them back into the fire, because next weekend we're playing, and we can do the drills and drill them to death, but are we going, like you said, are we going over signs? Are we going over rundowns, first and third, bunt coverages, backing up bases, pop fly communication? Some of these kids, they've never even met each other before. So it's really a crash course into building a team culture, understanding who's on your roster, trying to manage pitchers as best as possible. I think you have to, almost like the beginning of the spring, you have to kind of build them back up again. So talk to them on day one, get a feel for who's thrown. Some of these kids maybe have been training. Other kids probably got to knock the dust off their glove from, mid-July. But to your point, I think you have to have a player-parent meeting early on. You have to talk about the goals for the 6 weeks, discuss how quickly it's going to go, and then, set some goals for the fall. What do we want to get out of it? We want to, pick up right where we left off in the summer. And unfortunately for us, in 5 weeks, we have tryouts for our spring summer team again. So, trying to get the absolute most out of the fall season, it's tough. I think fall ball's tough with how quick it goes and how quick it gets on you. But you can definitely get a lot done. And I think it's those 2 ages specifically that you mentioned, the 11s and the 13s. There's so much to learn in such a short amount of time that, you need your assistant coaches, to your point. You need help, and you have to do a really good job with time management. Mapping out the entire 90 minutes and what you want to get out of it. And hopefully you get it all covered in the first 2 or 3 sessions, because then it's first tournament.
And I also think it goes back to the parents' expectations as well, right? A lot of them have never played for us before or haven't played for an organization. And so for the people listening, maybe you have an organization and you have all new parents, you have new players. Like, they don't know what to expect. Where are they going? What are they doing? They don't know how many practices there are, but what are the expectations of how early to get to practice? How early do I arrive at the games? Am I going to have even playing time? Are they going to, how am I working the rosters? Okay, we have 12 kids. Maybe you have 15 kids on your roster. Well, how are you going to maneuver and work that out so that way you don't have complaints at the end of the season? Like, they understand, okay, we have 15. We're going to play blah, blah, blah. We're going to make sure that this happens and that happens. And, maybe the first day, Saturday, everybody's getting equal playing time. But then on Sunday, when it's playoff Sunday, it totally changes. Or maybe you run your entire organization as if you're trying to win that tournament and you're just going to bat 9 and you're just going to, so whatever you're going to do, make sure that that's known so the parents can understand that, so you don't run into problems, because I think coaches don't think about that kind of stuff. They have to make sure that they're thinking of everything that they possibly can, so that when they have that parent meeting, everything is being told so that they can feel way more comfortable afterwards.
Yep. I know here we like to have our teams practice together. So if we've got 2 13U teams, we like to have them together. This way we've got 4 coaches at practice instead of just the 2. We can break up and do some of that, position-specific developmental type work, and then we can also add in a lot of inter squads, coach pitch scrimmage, getting them back up to speed on, the pace of the game, the speed of the game. It gives those pitchers, especially the 50-70 guys, a chance to pitch from the stretch for the first time, work on pickoffs, work on controlling the running game, as much as possible, and then getting those kids to hit and swing from 60 feet for the first time, getting those pitchers to throw with a batter in the batter's box. I think that's one of the slowest seasons ever. You go from Cooperstown with the juice bats hitting all the homers to now I'm playing 13U fall ball, and it's usually a 2-1 game and a bunch of walks and pass balls, and it takes kids 9 seconds to get down the line. So it's fun. There's a lot to teach, and the kids, like you said, you got to set the expectations and the goals on day one. You've got to be honest with the parents, and let the kids know that while you're here for 90 minutes, we're going to work and we're going to challenge you and we're going to push you, and you should be mentally and physically exhausted after practice.
And I think it also gets back to, like you were talking about, the culture, even like, talking about body language, talking about hustling on the field. What does that mean? Because to every single kid, what it meant to us to hustle on the field meant we sprinted on the field. When you say hustle to a kid now, they hustle, that just means, okay, if I was walking, I'm going to jog. Okay, if I'm jogging, I'm going to... So for every kid, that means something different. How do you have good body language? How are you a good teammate? What kind of language are you allowing? Are you allowing them to curse when they run down the line? Or are they not? If they do curse, what happens if, kind of laying it all out that way too, so the kids kind of know what parameters they're playing under. Because the last thing you want is for a kid to run down to first base. He says a bad word, you bench him for 3 innings. Now you're explaining to the parent that instead it's easier to be like, hey, listen, there's no profanity, or we're not, you just got to lay it on the line, because that way you're creating that culture that you want as a coach.
Well, yeah, and that's the challenge, right? You only have so much time with them. And then as soon as fall ball's over, you've got November, December, January, February, part of March. Like, I feel like that's really when the development takes place. So if you can do a good job at taking notes, and I love doing the end of the season evaluations, All right, so the 6 weeks is up. Sit with every kid and their parents, even if it's just for 15 minutes. Here's what I saw. Here's what I think we need to attack this winter. This is where we want to be by next March. Now you've got 4 months, of training. But for us, it's always a challenge because there's a lot of fluctuations between our elite and select team because we have so many fall athletes. So it's a lot of difficult conversations. But letting those kids know that you're not trying out every time you're on the field, but you've always got something to prove every time you're on the field. And you might get bumped up to that top team for the fall, and then before you know it, there's 18 football players coming back to try out for the next spring and summer. Like you say all the time, the things that you can control, your attitude, your effort, your hustle, being a good teammate, being that top step player. Those are the things that really stand out to us, and they matter because you want to develop that culture, and it's tough building a culture or developing a culture in such a short amount of time in 6 weeks.
And I think one of the things that can really help you as a coach is when you think about when you hand out the goal sheet that we do every single year, right in the beginning of the season, we ask players, what do you want to get out of the season? What positions do you want to play? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? At the end of the year, we ask them the questions. What's your favorite part of the season? Did you like to be a Red Hawk? What was your best memory? What are you most proud of? And then you kind of go through that, and it's like, what do you want those answers to be as a coach? Because I love when kids come in and like, oh, the best part of this year was practice. And I'm like, dude, that's a home run for me. If the part where I'm drilling them the most, I'm making it the hardest, if they thought practice was fun, well then that's a great job. When practice is boring and they don't look forward to it, and well then, half of the week is practice. You're practicing twice and you're playing, games on 2 days. So it's like, what do you want them to say in that, and if you work backwards, knowing what that kid wants to accomplish, what his goals are. So you can then tell yourself, okay, I need to make sure that Johnny works on this and he focuses on this. So at the end of the year, when I had this meeting, he did become a better hitter. Okay. And I think that, sometimes coaches just don't do that. They don't work backwards, and then they get all these answers back and they're like, oh man, like Johnny didn't have a good year. I don't know anything about him. I didn't know what he wanted. I didn't know what he liked. So as coaches, our responsibility is so great. There's so much power in what we do, in our words, in our actions. And I think coaches really need to understand how impactful that they are, because you can ruin a player or you can make them absolutely love the game.
No doubt about it. I'm looking forward to our coaches clinic this afternoon, and I challenge all the coaches listening, to develop as a coach. I think sometimes it's easy to fall into the same routine of, all right, I'll just follow the same practices I did in the summer or the same practice plans I did in the spring. But leaning on other people to help you get through maybe some things that you don't know too well. I mean, you and I are hitting and infield guys. So, in this coaches clinic this afternoon, I'm looking forward to hearing from some guys with some cool outfield drills, hearing from some guys with some catching drills that I can implement into practice because I'm not a catching guy. Talking to Coach Mikey, he's working on our newest Dominated Diamond pitching course about handling pitchers at practice. How do you implement, pitching into practice plans? And sometimes that's the hardest thing in the world to do. And then, just leaning on each other, asking for advice, asking questions. The best coaches are sponges. The same way we talk about our players that, want to learn and get better. That's my favorite thing about, our in-house coaches clinic. So if you guys have coaches out there that you can lean on, if there's people out there that you can trust within your organization or within your league, and you guys can kind of get together and help brainstorm ideas, I think it's only going to benefit you guys as coaches and absolutely the players.
100%. And I think that if the coaches think to themselves, okay, am I committed? Am I coachable? And am I aware? Am I committed to the kids? Am I committed to the process? Am I committed to practice? Am I committed to getting to the games on time and having a good practice plan so these kids can develop? Am I coachable and I'm constantly getting better? I'm leaning on other coaches. I'm making sure that I'm watching videos. I'm finding out answers to maybe some things that I'm not sure of. And then am I aware? Am I doing a good job? Am I aware at the field? Am I watching? Am I staying engaged? Am I making sure that each kid is developing, not just getting lost in the game, right? Like understanding what we're truly doing. So I think every coach has to be committed to the process. They have to be coachable and they have to be aware all the time of what's actually happening. And if they follow that, they're going to have a great year.
Yeah, completely agree. I think, looking back on our teams, the biggest complaints that we've gotten, or maybe the most frustrating complaints, are, coaches not being on time, coaches being on their phone in the dugout, coaches not being engaged, right? Those are all things that we can control as coaches. Sometimes we can't control wins and losses. Sometimes we're going to show up and get our teeth kicked in and lose and have a rough go of it. But I think that when the parents see that you care and that you're engaged and you're helping players during the game and you've got energy, right? These kids are going to take on the role of their coach, right? So we can't preach being on time and looking the part and doing things the right way and treating the umpires and the opposing teams with respect, and then we don't do it. So when I think about controlling what we can control, it's those things. It's getting there early. It's being the first person there. It's getting ready to throw BP an hour and 15 minutes before the game starts. It's being out on the field with the kids during warm-ups, right? The lineup card's written. I'm already prepared for the game. So now I can actually be out there. I can talk to the players. How you feeling today? How was your week at school? You start to develop that relationship with them to where they do trust you and they look up to you as a role model and a mentor. I think that stuff's easy. If you can do those things, now you can start to develop. You can coach. You can hold kids accountable. But it's really hard to hold those kids accountable for all the things that we're telling them, in our standards and our guidelines, if we don't hold ourselves to the same rules.
And I think some of the hardest things, if I ask myself this question, what's the hardest part of the fall? I have 4 things. Number 1, not knowing the talent that you have, right? Because you only have 2 practices. You don't have a lot of time. And you're like, okay, who is my number 1 catcher? Maybe I know that, but who can really pitch? Who hasn't really thrown that much? So knowing the talent that you have. Number 2 is being prepared. Like, we're talking about preparation and how to prepare, but there's a lot of stuff that you're not going to have ironed out by the time you play your first game. So you talk about this all the time, and that's making sure that you have your note card on game day and you're taking down notes of things that you need to be practicing and things that you need to go over so that at practice time, you can make sure that you hit those things. Then it's culture. It's always the hardest thing, like you said, in 5 weeks to have a good team culture when the kids don't know each other yet. How can we get them to know each other well? Maybe you're having a pizza party. Maybe in between games, you're taking them somewhere. Maybe after the game, you're all going somewhere. Maybe during practice, you're spending 15 minutes and doing some sort of team grouping kind of icebreaker stuff as much as you possibly can, because the season goes really, really fast. So I think those are some things that I think that when I think about what the hardest part of the fall is, it's those things. Understanding your talent, being totally prepared and getting yourself ready, having a good culture with your group. But I think those are some of the things that make it it's hard about the fall or getting ready into a short season that you need to be ready for.